Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. We are here with some more PGA DFS picks and lineup advice for FanDuel and DraftKings, this time for the Sony Open. Once again, out in Hawaii. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co founder here at Occupy Fantasy. And what we normally do in these PGA videos every single Wednesday is we talk about the weather and how it impacts the course. We talk about the betting markets. That's the big reason for this show. We talk about how golfers' odds to win have moved throughout the week. We talk about some of the chalk, the more popular players on the slate, and how we like them. And we'll talk about some 5% plays, golfers that will go way overlooked by the field that we want to get into our tournament lineups. Before we get started, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Get notified when we go live, upload any videos for any sports. Give us a thumbs up if you like the video. We appreciate that. And any questions you have about this PGA slate, I will monitor the YouTube channel throughout the night and into tomorrow morning. The slate locks at 12:10 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, so another late lock because it is in Hawaii. So any questions you have, comment on the video and we'll get back to you. So let us start here with the weather. And last week, the weather wasn't too big of an impact both on just the golfers in general or any wave splits. If you're new to PGA DFS, sometimes there can be weather early one morning, late one afternoon, and we can get a pretty sizable advantage playing golfers who tee off in a specific time slot. Now, that might be the case this week. It might not be too pronounced. Let's go to Wind Finder, one of our preferred sources for finding uh, for looking at wind forecasts, and this is in Honolulu. And we look at Thursday, January 12th, when the tournament starts. And again, this is local time. The golfers will tee off at 7 a.m. local time there, and we see that we have around from 8 to noon, basically, 15-mile-per-hour plus winds for the Thursday morning golfers. That drops to sub 10 mile per hour winds afternoon. And if you look on Friday, it's pretty calm most of the day. This would lead you to believe that golfers who tee off Thursday afternoon have a slight advantage over golfers who tee off Thursday morning. Now, it's not a huge difference, 5 miles per hour. It's a little bit of a difference. And it's not like we can go all in and say, let's only play golfers from Thursday afternoon. Once again, forecasts do change, and it's not super pronounced. Really, when we want to start wave stacking and playing guys from specific early or afternoon only groups, is once we see heavy winds throughout either both time slots on Thursday morning, Friday afternoon, vice versa, or we start to see heavy winds all around. Because as we know, the forecast change, and there's been many GPP winners who have wave stacked either a wave that looks good pre-tournament or a wave that looks bad pre-tournament, and the weather just flips. And unfortunately, I don't think we have a huge preference here one way or the other. Maybe if there's a tie or two guys are close in your rankings or you're trying to figure out the final roster spot, maybe you lean towards guys who tee off Thursday afternoon, Friday morning. But again, it's not something that we're super looking to do in this particular tournament. But again, do monitor it throughout the next 22 hours or so. All right, let's go back to DraftKings here. And let's talk about the betting market some. Let me change on screen here. Now, if you remember last week's video, we talked about one of the ways we look to find golfers who are overlooked by the DFS fields are golfers whose odds to win have improved at some sharp sports books. So we look at a few sharp sports books throughout the world and monitor and track their line movements. And I can say that there are 5 golfers who have seen their odds to win improve at all of the sports books that we monitor. So let's talk about those 5 golfers here. Number one, and again, these guys you generally want to get into your lineups, and based on their ownership, depends on which types of contests you want to play them in, how they fit in with the rest of your lineup. First one, and these are some names that you might not recognize, especially if you don't play PGA DFS often. Steven Yeager is number one who has gotten hit in all of the sharp sports books. And if we go to our Occupy model, occupyfantasy.com ranks every golfer. FanDuel and DraftKings has projected ownership. Let's look at the projected ownership for these golfers. Steven Yeager, just 11% on DraftKings, 8% on FanDuel. We love to see that. So certainly qualify as not a high-owned golfer. Anytime we can find these guys who have betting market moves like this and they're not highly owned, those are guys we want to get leverage on in our lineups. Now, next on the list, let's go back to DraftKings. It is Andrew Putnam, 8K on DraftKings here. And let's go back to the Occupy model. And if we look at his ownership, Kind of in that same range, 10% FanDuel, 11% DraftKings. Not highly owned. We love to see it. All right, back to DraftKings. Guy number 3, golfer number 3, who has seen odds to win improve at all of the sharp sports books that we monitor is KH Lee. Pretty pricey on this slate. He is, well, not that pricey, 8,700, but he is going to be relatively popular as we pull up KH Lee in the occupied model, 18%. He's over that 15% threshold, qualifies as a highly owned golfer. Doesn't mean we stray away from him. It just means that maybe we're a little more confident in his ownership if the sharp sports books are all moving his odds to win. Number 4 on this list, and this will surprise you a little bit because he doesn't have a very high ranking in our model, and that's Harris English, getting absolutely hammered at most sharp sports books. He is 7,800, and he's going to be one of the most popular golfers in the tournament. If we sort by DraftKings projected ownership, we have him as the number 5 highest owned golfer, 22% projected ownership as of Wednesday afternoon. And Harris English, our model looks at long-term form, and obviously had some time there where he wasn't playing that great, but played better recently in the past 6 months or so. And again, anytime the sharp sports books are moving their lines, we have to like them. Now, I could understand you not wanting to play Harris English, even with the line moves at 22%, given his past troubles. But again, they're moving his odds to win for a reason. And finally, this guy is super cheap, and it is Ben Griffin, 7,300 on DraftKings. If we look at his game log, pretty consistent, honestly, in the fall swing. Didn't miss a cut in the last 7 tournaments. And if we bring up the occupied model, Ben Griffin, just 7% projected ownership, the lowest projected ownership of any of these 5 guys. So the 5 guys that you want to look at for your tournament lineups, especially that are getting back into the betting markets. If you remember last week, the main guy we discussed, we talked about a couple guys earlier in the video, and then because the tournament was later on Thursday last week, like this week, the trifecta, the overlap plays, whatever you want to call them, these guys who got hit at all the sharp sports books, they changed a little bit. And the one that truly stood out was Cameron Young last week, and he backdoored a top 10 finish. Was important for tournament winning lineups. So see if we can do that again this week. The 5 golfers are Ben Griffin. It says Adam here, so we can keep track of them here on screen. Steven Yeager, Andrew Putnam, A.H. Lee, Harris English. All right. Now we can play whoever we want if we wanted to play those 5 guys together. So, all right. So those are the 5 guys that are backed by the betting markets the most this week, the ones that we trust the most. All right, let's talk about some of the most popular players. We talked about Harris English already. Let's transition here. Let's go back to the occupied model. The most popular projected players on DraftKings as of Wednesday afternoon. This is going to have another final update tonight, so make sure you check back to the model later this evening or early tomorrow morning to get the latest ownership projections. We have Tom Kim, number 1, Brian Harman, Sung J M, Cam Davis, Harris English. So the most interesting one that we have to discuss here is the most expensive player in the field in Tom Kim. And I get it. Okay. He has been outstanding on the PGA Tour, has been dominant, you could say, gets hot with the putter, has probably deserved being the favorite in this field and the most expensive golfer on DraftKings. I mean, look at these results. Won the Shriners, T25 Zozo, T11 in the CJ Cup, T10 in the Hero World Challenge, top 5 last week, the Century Tournament of Champions. It's hard to argue. Took the PGA Tour by storm. I just will say, I'm not the type of guy that is willing to play someone heavily at their peak ownership, peak price, peak salary. Tom Kim, this is the highest price he's ever been. This is the best odds to win he has ever had. And this is one of the highest ownerships he'll ever see. Generally, there are obviously rare occasions where buying high works out. I typically try to avoid buy high scenarios. I would play more balanced lineups this week if you choose to avoid Tom Kim or play Sungjae or Hideki in that top tier range to get different in tournaments. And I understand it. I'm not going to completely fade Tom Kim in my mass multi-entry lineups, but buying high here. And I get it. He could come out and win this tournament by 5 strokes, and we all look, or at least not we all look stupid. I look stupid here. But we're just understand that we are buying high on this price at 10-5, at 11-1 to win the tournament. It's pretty crazy. Let's enjoy it. And let's enjoy his greatness, but let's also be realistic about his expectations. The other guys that are pretty popular, let's go back here to the model. Brian Harmon with Tom Kim, they played last week. Sung Jae played last week. Cam Davis Harris English did not play last week. If you read other content, you watch other videos, you may hear a narrative or see a narrative about golfers who played last week perform better this week in this particular tournament in the Sony. If they played the tournament champions, they perform better in the Sony. And sure, they're better golfers generally, and there's some sample bias there because last week was all the best golfers on tour basically. Um, but you'll see some of the golfers who golfed last week have some of the highest ownership. So Kim, Harmon, Sung Jae, JT Poston, Cage Lee, Corey Connors, Jordan Spieth, some of these guys. What I will say is, if that is to be true, if guys who played last week fare better in this tournament historically, we should look to play some of the lower owned golfers in this tournament who played last week. Guys like, let's scroll down here, guys sub 10% that played last week. Maybe we roll with this narrative. And if it's going to work for the top end guys, the most popular, it should work for these guys as well. Let's keep scrolling. We're talking about Adam Svensson. Very high ceiling. We've seen it last year, one on tour. He's only 11%. Tom Hoagie actually tops our model this week. Our number one ranked golfer in the whole field for Occupy Fantasy is Tom Hoagie, just 10% projected ownership. JJ Spawn played last week. Adam Scott played last week. Billy Horschel played last week. Keegan Bradley. All these guys are sub 10% that played last week. So look at last week's field, especially if they perform poorly, right? Maybe it wasn't a course fit. Maybe they're just knocking some rust off after the winter break. Look who guys are sub 15% who played last week if you're going to go with that narrative. Finally, let's transition here and we'll talk about 5% plays, golfers who are projected to be in less than 5% of total lineups. And remember, if you remember last week, if you've listened to any of our videos, if you've read our PGA Daily Plug, you know that getting a 5% or less golfer, ideally two of them in your tournament lineups, is the key to winning tournaments. I'll give you two names this week that stand out to me as sub 5% plays that no one's really talking about, that will go completely overlooked. One is a guy who played last week, Chez Reavie. We have him projected for 2% projected ownership. Let's look at Chez Reavie here. 7K, played last week. Maybe he gets that tournament of champions bump here, but getting a little bit of love in the betting markets, just 2% projected ownership. Obviously volatile with the missed cuts, but looks a little better this week. And 2% projected ownership would get a guy who's a little more informed than some of these other golfers coming off an extended break. Chez Reavie, 2% projected ownership. You have to love that. Another guy, didn't play last week, but has won this tournament before. We haven't projected for 4% projected ownership, and that's Ryan Palmer. You may look at his game logs, his tournament logs, whatever you want to call them. Cut, T45, cut. Not great in his last four outings, right? However, finished strong at the Hero. And if you watched my interview on the Stochastic channel with Player Q, Neil Orfield, the high stakes episode, I talked about qualitative data. And our writer, Niramata, is tuned in, does a great job of putting these types of nuggets in our daily plug at OccupyFantasy.com and his player selections. But if you read player quotes, a lot of times you can gain some information for guys who have been playing poorly, and we can expect a turnaround. Ryan Palmer fits that group. I'm going to pull up a transcript here. This is from, let's scroll up so you just know what we're looking at here. This is from the QBE Shootout, December 11th, partnered with Charlie Hoffman. They perform well. And this is the quote I want to show you here. Let's see here. So the question was, it's a fun event. You guys come into this team event. You're still playing for something, looking forward. Basically, what do you take away from this tournament? Ryan Palmer, this is the huge part here. This was huge for me. I've been working on this new putter for the last 3 or 4 tournaments, but the ball striking, he knows it. It's been bad. But he said it turned around this week. Drove it well for most of the week. His iron play is just where he needed it to be. Told his caddy when he got done, the Sony Open can't get here fast enough. Let's talk about a little more. Reiterates, the Sony can't get here fast enough. For a guy who's excited, has won here before, who has this tournament on his mind, clearly has turned something around in his ball striking, and we get him. Whoops, that is the wrong browser. We get him 2% on FanDuel, 4% on DraftKings. Now, it is very likely, very possible, maybe likely, that he misses this cut, right? Maybe he's just washed and doesn't do it. But projections aren't factoring this quote in, aren't factoring in a potential turnaround, aren't factoring in some other qualitative aspects. Now, we're going to play a bunch of 2%, 3%, 4% guys over the next 6 months. A lot of them are going to miss the cut. A lot of them aren't going to pan out. But there are going to be times, it happened last year, it has happened every single year, and you can watch it for every tournament, that when Ryan Palmer finishes top 5, we're going to win a bunch of money. And these are the types of plays we're looking at for tournaments. You're not going to play Ryan Palmer in your cash games. You're probably not even going to play him much in your small field. I'll play him some in small field because I have a higher risk tolerance, and I'll play chalky in the rest of my spots. But you play guys like Ryan Palmer, and those qualitative aspects turn into quantitative on-course data, then we're well ahead of the field. You may ask, Brian, where do you get information like this? If you Google PGA press conference transcripts, there are a couple sites out there that put it out after every tournament. Just, Monday mornings, Tuesday mornings, go through and review the previous tournament. You'll find some nuggets, I guarantee you. All right, so that'll do it for this video. Hopefully that information is helpful to you for the Sony Open. I encourage you after this to go read our daily plug, OccupyFantasy.com. Top PGA DFS player Nirmata gives his top plays. Remember, they scored like 2,500 points over expected the last 3 years. He gives specific lineup construction tips for different contest types. The Wednesday update will be posted after this video is posted Wednesday afternoon with betting market analysis. Our Occupy model you saw on screen will be updated later tonight with projected ownership, round 1 through round 4 showdown projections as well. And our lineup builder allows you to build up to 300 PGA DFS lineups using our optimal lineup criteria. Not much more you need to crush PGA DFS. So Brian Jester for Occupy Fantasy. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you watch it this far, we'd appreciate it. Helps you out. You'll see these videos again in the future. Give us a thumbs up. Helps everybody out. Any questions, comment on the video. Join our Discord server, occupyfantasy.com/Discord. Chat with other members of the community. Good luck in the Sony Open.